Hi folks, now that we know how to recognize when it's a good idea to try to use the cosine law to find a missing side or a missing angle, we're going to actually get down to the nuts and bolts of how we do that. Okay, so we're going to solve some triangles. So we're looking at, in this case, solving triangles using the cosine law, and we're going to use it to find missing sides, of course, and also missing angles, so all that good stuff. Alrighty, so let's get right down to it as soon as we can here. So here's our first example. So the best way to learn how to do things, I guess, is to practice with a couple of examples. And then, of course, in your next video, we'll get down to some questions that we have to do. So for this, then, we're going to look at, in the first case, how do we sort of solve for the missing side x here? Well, the first thing we usually do with a triangle is we label it. So we've got a series of highlighted steps going on here. So let's label the diagram first. So we can go A, B, and C for our angles, and then I guess that would correspond as side B would be in the same position as side X here, and then side C would be in the same position as this 9 units, and then over here for this 11 we're going to have side A. Okay, so the first thing we got to do after that is check the pattern to make sure we got everything we need. So remember, finding a missing side, we have to have that side angle side pattern where we have two sides and their included angle, and that's what we've got here. So the pattern looks good. Now we have to set up the equation. So how do we set up this equation? Well, if we're looking for something that we called side B, remember the equation looks like b squared equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine of angle B. And so as long as the first two match and the others are consistent, AC, we're in good shape here. So there's the equation we want to use. We have to plug in the right bits and pieces. So side B was the x that we were looking for here. So we have x squared equals a squared plus c squared is 9 and 11, or sorry, 11 and 9 respectively there, minus 2 times 11 times 9 times the cosine of angle B, which looks to me like 55 degrees. Okay. So the next thing it says to do is to evaluate the expression. So when we evaluate the expression on the right-hand side there, so plug all this stuff into our calculator. You can do all that in one step or one bit at a time. You just have to be real careful when you're doing this, and this is a very common place for folks to make errors. Make sure that you look at this as three separate terms. If you're not doing it all in one step in your calculator, watch your order of operations. So the 11 squared and the 9 squared, and then all of this together are your three terms. So before you can start adding and subtracting, those three bits have to be evaluated, and then you got one addition and one subtraction. So make sure you do all of this stuff over here on the end, sorry, right over here on the end, all this multiplication and cosigning and all that beeswax, that's got to go down before you can add or subtract. So watch your order of operations, very common place to make mistakes there. So if I evaluate all those things and stick them together, I'm going to do it in the sort of calculator one-step method. So if I do that all in my calculator, I get x squared equals about 88.43 units. So the last step, of course, to figure out what x is going to be to take the square root of both sides of this. So x is going to be about equal to the square root of that, 88.43. And that gives me an answer of 9.40. So we're going to say 9.4 units. And that seems like a reasonable answer to be in line with the 9 and the 11 that we have with the other two sides. So we get 9.4 units for that one. Okay, and that's how we use cosine law to find a missing side. Let's see how we use cosine law to find a missing angle. So first we got to label up our diagram. That's our first step that we have listed up here. So let's go with A, B, and C for our three angles. And then that makes this side C, side A, and side B will have to be up here. And check the pattern. So if we check the pattern of what's going on, I have to have all three sides, side, 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 to find any missing angle I like, and that's what I have, so we're in good shape there. So then we set up our equation, and we're looking for the angle that corresponds to C here. So the equation says that cosine of angle C, that version, is going to be a squared plus b squared minus c squared all over 2 times a times b. Okay, and then from there I just fill in all the stuff that I need to have. So in that equation I'm going to have cosine of angle was theta that we were really supposed to call it, that we're looking for here. It's got to be equal to 3.5 squared plus b squared. Oh, sorry, b was 3.5, wasn't it? I've got that backwards, so let me fix that real quick. So cosine theta is going to be equal to 2.8 squared. Got to be careful where we put things here, just to make sure we're not making any mistakes. That's going to be 3.5 squared minus 4.3 squared, all divided by 2 times 2.8, which was A, times 3.5, which is our B here. Okay, so then it says to evaluate the expression. So we've taken care of the set up the equation bit. So we evaluate that expression, and it won't tell us right away what the angle is, but rather what the cosine of the angle is. So cosine theta here, now I've got to haul out my handy dandy calculator again. I've got 2.8 squared plus 3.5 squared minus 4.3 squared, and that's all going to be divided by 2 times 2.8 times 3.5, and that gives us a magic number of 0.0816. And I always like to go to 4 decimal places, as I'm sure you've heard me say before, when I'm using trig ratio. So 0.0816, that's 4 decimal places for that one. Okay, you got to be real careful again. Make sure you do all of these things together and square each one of those, and then put all of those together before you do this division with that fraction. That's another common mistake that people make. So do all the squaring and the stuff up top, multiply the things on the bottom, then you use your fraction and divide that out. Then to get our angle theta here, all we have to do is use the inverse cosine. So inverse cosine of that answer that we got is going to be an angle like 85.3 degrees is what I'm getting. So I've got theta as 85.3 degrees. Okay? So that's a pretty reasonable answer. That's something less than 90, which we hope to get with acute triangles. Okay, so these are just a quick rundown of all the things that we had. Label, check, set up, evaluate, find x when we're looking for a side. Label, check, set up, evaluate, and then find theta when we're looking for an angle. Okay, more practice to come.